Chapter 813, Tyrant. Aside from the sailor pathway's raging blow, Alger knew that he didn't have any powers that were adequate against the six-winged gargoyle's strong body due to its immunity to lightning strikes. Of course, directly creating a resonance with its hearing organs and body of heart and mind through the use of his singing was the most effective method. If this encounter had been anywhere else, Alger definitely would have exploited the gargoyle's great weight and lack of agility to circle around it. Then, as he sang to affect it, he would attack the same spot with sharp wind blades, slowly grinding away at his enemy through the cumulative damage over time. But now he was in a catacomb, and due to the environment's limitations, any acts of directly avoiding it would only cause the gargoyle to turn its gaze to Jam and Sparrow. It would then attack the crazy adventurer with its 8-meter-long trident, preventing him from seizing the opportunity to finish off the three deceased bodies. And most important of all, Alger suspected that his singing will have more adverse effects on Jam and Sparrow than what the gargoyle was capable of. Bang! The stone trident crashed heavily into the ground, blasting open an exaggerated crater. It left the catacomb shaking as if an earthquake had happened. As for Alger, he didn't attempt to parry it. With the help of strong winds, he dodged to the right and soared up, agilely dodging the gargoyle's attack as he dashed for the monster's head. At that moment, he saw the grayish-white eyes which burned with flames. Alger's mind turned sluggish as his body instantly stiffened. He had the feeling of being petrified again, but his skin didn't show signs of spreading grayish-white colors. Thanks to the inertia, he continued soaring upwards, but he wasn't able to brandish his dagger. He slammed straight into the gargoyle's head before loudly being repelled backward, his body aching in pain. The heavy grayish-white trident reflected in his eyes again as his thoughts were sluggish, making it impossible for him to put up any effective resistance. Suddenly, a hand grabbed him by the shoulder and pulled him to the side. Bang! Rubble flew as sparks were produced. The gargoyle's heavy trident had blasted open a huge crater again. Alger's body trembled as his vision regained its clarity, while his thoughts were rapidly restored back to normal. He was like someone who woke up from an irresistible nightmare, which he was helpless against, as he regained control over his body. Only then did he realize that Jam and Sparrow had appeared by his side. There were still remnant flashes of lighting and sizzling sounds in the corner where the three deceased bodies were. Do not lock gazes with it, attack its chest. As Klein pulled Alger away quickly in a bid to dodge the stone trident, he succinctly advised his companion. Alger had personally experienced and witnessed many battles, so without further explanation from Jam and Sparrow, he knew what the latter meant. He stopped receiving aid as he nimbly circled to the gargoyle's flank. Tab, tab, tab. He ran towards the gargoyle and waited for the stone trident to sweep over him, before soaring high up with the help of the strong gales to dodge the attack. Whoosh! Another hurricane pushed Alger towards the gargoyle's chest. During this process, he closed his eyes, pulled back his right arm, and bulged his muscles. Then, with his ability to judge distances as a seafarer, he threw out his dagger-wielding right fist. Howling wind blades and sizzling lightning were emitted along with his fist. Bang! Alger's right fist heavily struck the gargoyle's chest, producing an explosive effect. It caused the gargoyle stone to be covered in fine cracks as silver lightning snaked around. Following that, the cracks widened and depressed into a pit. With a cracking sound, his dagger exploded, turning into countless fragments that scattered everywhere. The strong recoil sent Alger flying back. In midair, he saw through the corner of his eye that the hatted Jam and Sparrow had at some point in time circled to the front and cocked his revolver. Right on the heels of that, the cold adventurer suddenly raised his hand and aimed the black barrel right at the gargoyle. Bang! Amidst a loud echo, a bullet tore through the pit in the gargoyle's chest and pierced it. Following the explosive boom, the grayish-white stone monster convulsed a few times before the flames in its eyes were extinguished. After a brief pause, it collapsed like a mountain, producing an exaggerated sound and earthquake-like shaking. Death Knell had delivered a lethal blow. And at this moment, Alger had just maintained his balance and found his footing thanks to the wind. Klein didn't speak to him or search for the spoils of war. He immediately turned around and headed for the charred area where Azek's copper whistle sat silently. Slippery tentacles covered in fish scales moved as the deceased body, with nearly half its body gone, had stood up. Bolts of lightning continued snaking around its body. It was the domineering, savage, tyrannous deceased body that wore a tattered brown jacket with a triangular captain's hat. It was missing its left arm and right leg, as well as having half its head. Its body was covered in traces of charred and melted flesh. But even so, it didn't sleep in peace. It was still attempting to fuse with the surrounding flesh and blood in order to obtain a stronger state. One had to know that Klein had used Lightning Storm, which he had recorded from the Sea God Scepter. Even if the act of recording had reduced its might, it was definitely the beyonder power at the demigod level. Just the fact that the other two deceased went silent without letting out a grunt was a testament of its might. This awakened deceased body is problematic. Klein's heart stirred as he made center leap onto the smooth surface of Azek's copper whistle before attempting to reflect onto the deceased fish scale on its slippery tentacle. At that moment, through the marionette, Klein sensed a tyrannical and high-level repulsive force. The wraith was unable to possess it. Senner was even repelled, as it couldn't help but lose its invisibility. Upon seeing this, Alger didn't question the situation. He raised his hands and created a spiraling wind around the deceased body, hoping to restrain its actions. However, the wind didn't sweep inwardly, as though it was afraid of something. It was forcefully dissipated as it rapidly vanished. The only thing to be happy about was that the deceased body didn't immediately attack the duo. Instead, it jumped to the left, bent its back, and attempted to pick up Azek's copper whistle. Klein immediately flicked his wrist, and precisely flipped Leymano's travels to the page with abyss shackles. This was a beyonder power, which Lin had recorded, one belonging to a Sequence 7 vampire. As Klein swiped his death knell-wielding right hand onto the notebook, the shadows around the deceased body suddenly came to life and manifested chains that shackled it firmly to the ground. Taking advantage of his opponent's brief pause, Klein raised his revolver in a deadpan manner. Different colors, red, green, and white, immediately appeared in his vision. Aiming at the white, Klein pulled the trigger. Bang! A pale golden beam shot into the head of the deceased body, causing it to rupture immediately into a spray of blood. At the same time, the purifying bullet also emitted a sun-like radiance that illuminated the target's body. The deceased body melted like wax as it bent its waist and lost its balance, collapsing right beside Azek's copper whistle. Monsters without any intelligence that only move on instinct are much easier to deal with than beyonders of the same level. However, am I letting the copper whistle down? Ever since it was given to me, it has suffered explosions, the catharsis of lightning, and the purification of sunlight. Life sure isn't easy for it. Klein repented for a second before controlling Senner to pick up the ancient and exquisite copper whistle and stuffing it inside his body. He didn't directly head over, afraid that a deceased body would awaken. Hence, he continued letting Senner to investigate the fellow who could resist the possession effect. Klein suspected that the deceased had an item of a rather high level. Soon, Senner in his non-wraith form touched something and pulled it out. It was a card. On the face of the card was a man wearing a papal tiara with both hands held up. Before him were prostrated believers, and behind him was lightning, dark clouds, gales, and waves. Klein was very familiar with the man, because he had a portrait of this person in another set of attire. It was Emperor Roselle. And to the top left of the pontiff-dressed Roselle, there was a line of text formed from resplendent starlight. Sequence 0, Tyrant. The card of blasphemy from the storm pathway, the Tyrant card. Klein instantly recalled how the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom addressed the Lord of Storms, Tyrant. Alger also saw the card of blasphemy as his gaze froze instantly. Flames of greed flared up in his eyes. He took a deep breath and moved his gaze away as he looked to the side and said, "The battle was intense. Perhaps other entities deep inside this cathedral have been awoken by us. So, let's store away the things as quickly as possible and prepare to leave." "Mr. Hanged Man, do you think I'm not aware of that? There's no need for you to nag. What happened to our tacit teamwork from before Hess, indeed. The Tyrant card has affected you. You can hardly calm down, and you have become talkative. As Klein got Wraith Center to pick up the card of Blasphemy and enter one of the deceased bodies to accelerate the production of the Beyonder characteristic, he coldly said, "You've already wasted 5 seconds." Alger was taken aback. Without saying another word, he walked to the remains of the six-winged gargoyle and dug out the eyeball that glowed red. Then, he patiently waited for a moment and reached into its shattered back to extract a gargoyle translucent crystal. Elsewhere, with the Wraith's help, the deceased body that was covered with yellow-green pus produced a blob of brown soil. It had roots to it with hidden blood vessels. It appeared rather strange. Without wasting time to guess at the sequence or pathway it belonged to, Klein got Center to store it away before heading for the deceased body, whose slippery tentacles were still twitching slightly, to accelerate the production of the Beyonder characteristic. Seeing what looked like a jellyfish with azure blue seawater in it take form, Klein and Alger suddenly heard a dragged-out sound. Sigh. This sighing came from deep within the cathedral, bringing along with it an indescribable sense of ancientness.